Welcome back to another episode of STEM and Stilettos. This is your host, Zofia Morales, and today we are going to discuss breaking barriers, scaling success, and inspiring women entrepreneurs with Dr. Andi Simon. So, Andi, I am so happy to have you here today with me.
What a delight to be invited to your wonderful, wonderful podcast. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So you have an incredible background. You studied anthropology. You worked in the Fortune 500 in companies and corporations. You've been doing consulting. Take us a little bit through that journey. How do you get from anthropology to corporate consulting?
Well, if you believe in serendipity, my journey has been one of much serendipity. I got my doctorate. I was an anthropologist and I was a professor and I got my tenure. I had my postdoc and I was on a career path that seemed to be the one does when you have an academic focus.
I was going to say, it kind of checks off all the boxes they tell you when you want to go be a professor.
Well, I also found a tenured available university that was very interesting. It was interdisciplinary. It suited me. And I felt very much like I belonged. And I say that because I didn't go looking for an option. By chance, my husband was an executive at Citibank during deregulation and at a lovely cocktail party with executives there. We were talking about what do you do, all the conversations you have over a nice glass of wine. And one of them said, why don't you come help us change? My expertise was on how people adapt when they come here to this country and return and how they change. And so I said, well, I can do that. And so I took a leave of absence for a year from the university and I became a banker. Actually, I became a consultant to Citibank during the period of great change. It taught me a great deal. They didn't know what I did, and they didn't really care. I didn't really know what they did, and I didn't care. I had no idea what was banking, and I got into it without intentionality, but with a lot of serendipity. And I ended up spending 14 years as a banker. I was SVP of a savings bank, and then I was recruited to become EVP of a commercial bank that became part of M&T Bank. And I was always in situations that were going through change. For the savings bank, I bought their first ATM. I started to train their staff to become salespeople, not just service people. We used to laugh that people came to work in a bank from 9 to 12 and 1 to 3. And if they didn't steal, they stayed forever. It was a different time that was coming.
Yeah.
And then I got bored because banking became commoditized and I got into healthcare by chance. And I truly think that there's a lot of chance to life. You listen, people say things. And somebody I knew from banking was recruiting from Montefiore Medical Center. You want to come in and start their branding and marketing? And I said, I can do that. I knew nothing about healthcare. And they weren't quite sure what an anthropologist was going to do there, but I did. And I spent 7 years in 2 healthcare systems, helping them adapt to managed care to change. And I set that up because my whole career has been about being in vacuums, environments that are going through transformation, helping people do something they don't like to do, which is to change. And then after 9/11, I sat in the hospital listening to people call, and I knew it was a moment for me, that it was a catalytic moment. And so I launched my business as a corporate anthropologist that helps companies change. And that was my positioning from the beginning. I haven't changed it in 23 years, but I knew that what I liked to do was what people didn't like to do, which was figure out better solutions, find ways to adapt to changing times, begin to understand their business through a fresh lens, begin to see how to grow it when things were stalled or stuck. And so my career has been one of training in academia, in business, and now as an entrepreneur, both helping other entrepreneurs and helping other businesses, often when they can't see what's right in front of them. It's so amazing because it's right there, but they need a fresh lens to come and look at it and see, oh, that's what's upon. And it's always a great opportunity, just waiting. So that's who I am.
That is really, really intriguing. And you're effortlessly doing something that a lot of women struggle with, which is, well, I don't have the credentials to XYZ, right? Because you went from academia into corporate consulting with a bank of all things. And a lot of women would look at that and go, well, I don't know anything about banking. I don't know anything about corporate, all of this. So talk to me a little bit about the mindset that you go into something like that with. How do you sell yourself when you're in a situation like that where you feel like maybe you don't have all the credentials, but you still feel you can be of service?
It's very interesting. I had to give two workshops on imposter syndrome at two women's conferences. And I opened it by saying, I've always been an imposter. I sort of enjoy because in some ways, I never thought of myself that way. But in hindsight, I realized I never was fully competent, but always confident. And I
Mm.
do think that that confidence did come from, I know how to do this. It came from curiosity and from an openness to learn and to ask questions and to basically be able to say, I can work with that, but I'm not quite sure I fully understand it. Can you help me explain it? And I was in awe of how people were very open and very anxious, particularly since they didn't fully understand it either. When
Oh,
you regulate an industry, everybody is almost in the same place. Nobody is fully competent. And so they're looking for fresh ideas. The whole senior management team was coming from consumer packaged goods, and that's where my husband had come from. They all were bringing in new skills to a place going through a great transformation. This was so interesting. Healthcare was the same. Managed care, what's that? Doctors would scream at me. I can take care of a patient, but I don't know how to get them. And
yeah.
I said, it's okay. We'll figure it out. And once you began to develop, we live the story. So from my perspective, I was not at all flawed, concerned about not having a fully a whole story put together. What I brought was opportunity, hope, skills, different. They didn't quite know what I was going to do. I said, let's look. I taught a lot of people how to be observers, participate in ways they hadn't before, just hang out and begin to listen to what customers were saying. You didn't have to know because you couldn't know because they didn't know. And once
Yeah.
you got comfortable there, you realized, oh, I can do that. And then once I became quite comfortable doing that, I could move up into the hierarchy without ever really feeling competent, but very confident. And you and I, when we were talking before, how many boardrooms was I in when I was the first or the only? And I remember going to one, my owner bank had me on the board come in. And there were many, many, many men. I won't tell you how many, a nun and me. We didn't say very much. But we began to break down the barriers and get the respect. People weren't sure what we did, but they did need to want to know more about what we were doing and who we were, and what we brought to the table. It was just an opportunity to craft a new place for us and for women in general, and to bring in opportunities. And I loved lifting. We used to say, as we rise, we lift others. And
Yes.
that's part of our job. But that was my career. And I'm really, people say, well, when are you going to retire? I said, I did about 30 years ago. If doing retirement is what you love to do, I love to do what I'm doing now. And that's to help people see, feel, and think in new ways, because that's what we love to do.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful and amazing thing when you can make that happen. It just puts me in awe when I see somebody who can move out of a stuck place that they were in into expansiveness and curiosity and moving forward. It thrills me no end.
Well, I'm glad that you and I share the same kind of joy at things that people really don't find joyful. The brain hates to change. And when there's no certainty, like today, there's no
Yes.
predictability, people get very immobilized. They go through the deep freeze. Better not to move, be an ostrich, than to try new things. And I'm working to mentor some women who are finding that all of a sudden the business has dried up. And so the question is, how can we reinvent ourselves for a client that we haven't seen before in a way that might
Yes.
add value innovatively? And, I'm a blue ocean strategist, and I just love helping them find ways to create new markets. It's really a cool time.
Absolutely. And that was one of the reasons I wanted you on, that and the ability to create culture within an organization, because I think that can be sort of a mysterious thing when you've got a group of people that come together and it starts to take on this life of its own, but you're maybe not sure you like the direction it's headed.
You've been there.
Yeah, I've been there. If we are in that situation, what are some of the steps that we can take to maybe right that ship or figure out how that culture is going wrong on us?
I just got a new client who's asked just that question. He's made a merger and he's got two companies with very different ways of doing things.
Yes.
Call it culture, but at the end of the day, you just sit back and watch, and they do things and value things in different ways. And often that is what happens and why mergers and acquisitions, what 70% of the time don't work.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize that part of the value you've acquired are the people and the way they do things. So your question is, how do you begin to assess it, determine what you would prefer it to be? Because if you don't know what you would prefer it to be, you can't get there.
Yeah.
Begin to move it forward. There are many, tools out there. We happen to be trained and very comfortable using the Organizational Cultural Assessment Instrument, the OCAI. People
Hmm.
can, look at it, ocai-online.com. They're located in the Netherlands, and they have the license on this tool that was developed at the University of Michigan. Dr. Kim Cameron was wonderful. I've used it for many clients. But it's in its simplest form, it gives you an assessment today. How creative are you? How controlling? How competitive? And how clannish or collaborative? And when you look at it, I'm just looking at this individual's first chart, first one to come in, and everybody takes it, and he clearly thinks that they're extremely competitive, but can't get along at all, and really wants to become much more around the center, where in fact we are collaborative, but get results. We're creative, but we have rules and a hierarchy for organizing them. Those are the best and the strongest kinds. But I have clients with different departments, one of which is completely clan, another completely competitive. I had one client and they made 4 acquisitions, all of which were very different than what he was doing. And he couldn't figure out why he couldn't get his processes into place so they could get the results they wanted. And they kept saying, "What are you talking about?" I don't know what it means.
We don't do processes.
They were family firms and they were waiting for the rainmaker to help them be creators. So it's a
Yeah.
very interesting, I like the process because it immediately shows you on the graph what you want and what you would like it to be. And once you begin to migrate, then the question becomes, and I had a hospital system who wanted to be more innovative and collaborative. So collaboration. Do you want the nurses to contact housekeeping right away when a patient's discharged so they can change the bedding? Oh, no, no, that's too fast. We can't do it that way. Housekeeping doesn't move that way. They come up at their process, but we want to collaborate better. Okay, give me another collaboration. How are you going to work? There were 9 unions, 9, even the nurse managers had one.
Yeah.
How are you going to get organized so that the staffing is more fluid? And innovation, give me an innovation. Will nurses be able to change the doctor's directives at the bedside? No, no, no. How are you going to be more innovative in the emergency room? And so while they aspired to be able to be creative and collaborative, actually behaving that way was a foreign entity.
Hmm.
And really they aspired to something they weren't ready to go try. Because the
Yeah.
way they've always done it, the habits were so comfortable. And the new one was very frightening. What will
Yes.
happen? And then the fear became overwhelming. So the CEO signed every check. So I can give you a little clue on how control.
Control is high.
So
Yes.
high. But it's a wonderful, I guess, a step to think about what is it we want to do. Particularly, I had one client, they were down in Mexico and they couldn't hold on to anybody who came in who was young. They were
Mm.
so siloed and so regimented. They made cement and they made it very well, but nobody liked each other. And so the new people came in and said, "No, we're soccer teams. We want to play as a team. And you're
Yeah.
all in silos." And so they too wanted to be more collaborative. The silos had a hard time having a conversation, much less a meeting together. And you
Sure.
realize that the culture was so embedded that it was going to be a hard path to get to some place where they knew they had to go if they were going to bring on new people. Because if not, they would grow old and it would go away. There was nobody who was going to work there.
Yeah, exactly. They don't have another generation to fill in those seats when die, retire, and all that kind of thing happens. Yeah. Wow. So let me ask you something. What was it that pushed you? What inspired you to take the leap into entrepreneurship? And how did your background shape your approach to building out your business, your retirement business?
It's a great question. I grew up in a family firm. My parents and my grandmother had a wonderful business in Manhattan, and I was supposed to take it over. And I grew up doing everything from working in the basement to working at the cash register to running the place when I became old enough. So I had business in my ancestry, probably in my DNA. After 9/11, I had already been thinking about what was it going to be the next phase of my own career. And my family was at the point where my great daughters had finished college and they were beginning to look at, the next stage for them. My husband was successful, and it seemed like a good moment for me to launch. But I wasn't quite sure what to launch. And I have a hunch as I coach women, the story is not always so simple. I had
Yeah.
a wonderful PR guy, and I said to him, John, here's my story. And he came back and he said, Andy, you're a corporate anthropologist that helps companies change. And I went, yes. And now the question became, who could I tell the story to? And I
Mhm.
learned something extremely important. It wasn't what I did, it was what they needed. I picked
Mm.
that up right away. I picked up a college, Centenary College in Hackettstown, New Jersey, was a wonderful referral, and they had stalled. It became a bit of my story. I said, okay, so I became anthropological with them, hung out, and began to see why they stalled. They were in an area without a lot of commuters. It was a very rural area. And consequently, their growth was going to have to come from outside of the location. And so I
Mm.
began to understand that it wasn't how I was going to do it, it was what they needed, which was to see things through a fresh lens. And so I can begin to take you through my journey over the last 23 years. It's all been interesting for me and for those clients who are stuck or stalled. But it is an interesting time today to begin to think how to apply it as well. And I can chat with you a little bit about how you build a business, whether you scale or you don't scale. But it is a time to really reflect on women in entrepreneurship and what works for them in a very fast changing world. And it's going to be interesting.
Oh, we are living in interesting times, it's for sure. There's no doubt there at all.
Yeah.
So, as a champion for women entrepreneurs, what do you see as some of the biggest barriers that we're facing right now when it comes to starting a business and then subsequently scaling it?
Well, you and I are both coaches at times, and I find that many of the early stage businesses that women form, what are there, 13 million women-owned businesses. 10 million of them don't make $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so many of them, it's a side hustle. They're looking to figure out a way to have something in addition to whatever their main job is. The internet has allowed them to do all kinds of great things, but it's an interesting world where they think of themselves as an entrepreneur, but they're in a business. They're small business people. The ones who are scaling, the biggest problems they have is not funding it out of revenue, but understanding finance and what
Mm.
kinds of finance are the best. And we've done some research about it, and they really are learning on the job without the kind of background and expertise to help them understand. There's the friends and family, there's the angel funding. Is when is the bank the
Yes.
right one? When is the venture capital? We claim that venture capitalists give only 4% of their money to women, but there are other sources. If only the women understood which source for what purpose at what time and stage. Sarah Blakely funded her Spanx business out of revenue. Do you want to do that? Sometimes. How much do you want to
Yeah,
give away? I met a woman who gave away too much too fast and found herself without a business. And so
exactly.
that would be one of the most important things for us to talk about, which is like, where do you start for funding?
I would love to dig into that, but we are up on our first break. So we will put a pin in that conversation for when we come back. And I would like to invite all of you out there today to spend a little time with your pen and with your piece of paper and step back a little bit from what you're doing, what you're engaged in, and take a look at where your business is in from a more macro perspective. Where are you fitting into the marketplace? How does your culture feel? How do you feel about engaging with your business? And spend a little time around those issues because they tend to give you insight into the areas that need attention and the areas in which you're actually doing quite well. And I think as women, a lot of times we don't give ourselves the credit for the places we're doing good. So spend some time with that thought exercise and we will talk about where to get your money for what you're doing when we return. Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales, and I am still here with Andi Simon. And before the break, we're kind of delving into creative finance, bootstrap finance, and some of the other ways that you can finance your venture. So let's dig into that a little bit, Andi, and explore what's kind of most appropriate and how do you decide?
Well, your business gets very personal for you. And so if I had to start at the biggest obstacle that many women entrepreneurs face is that they are uncomfortable with bringing in money from outside and knowing how to use it appropriately for what purposes to get the right returns and how to evaluate the returns. And so consequently, when you're early stage and you're getting angel funding or you're getting friends and family funding, what do you use it for? Are you using it for payroll? Are you using it to invest in product development? Are you using it for equipment? What is the need that you have identified? There's always payroll, but the question is, what is the best and most use for this, and how are you beginning to develop your revenue streams? The second part is that as you're beginning to scale, you're going to be looking at what you need to get to what stage. And there's always a company at X million that wants to go to 3 times X million.
Right.
And when you talk to them, you begin to realize that they don't really understand things go up geometrically, not arithmetically.
Mm.
Right? If you're going to go from 5 million to 20 million, it's not simply adding some more stuff, it's adding a whole different approach to it. And that requires often new talent to come in who really understand both how to finance it appropriately, how to manage the flows, and how to watch out for the slow flows that go through. You can't wait 120 days to get paid. So there's all kinds of issues on how are you going to underwrite it. And then when you do get to that 20 million, if you're going to go where you want to go, 50 million, you have to have some idea whether the market will carry you, how to do it slowly, or how to grow through either acquisitions or other kinds of funding. And I mentioned that one woman who tells a story about having built a good business and brought in venture capital funding and found herself, actually brought in private equity, and found herself giving away 51%. And finding yourself now no longer in control, and then finding yourself out of a business.
Yes, because sometimes they will do that. They will just slip the founder right out the side door.
Right out the side door. And so for women who are trying to grow a business, it's time for an education. Now, I can give you the aughts, but not be your coach. But I can tell you to find a good coach who you trust, who can be a really good provider of insight into the best ways to do it. Now, It isn't easy because you're learning both a new business, how to run that business, and how to fund that business. And if you are wise, you'll start with the numbers. You'll become really good at those numbers. You'll understand what the numbers mean. Don't turn it over to somebody without being really deep into the numbers. If you're uncomfortable with the numbers, get comfortable.
Yeah, or find a mentor who can help you get comfortable.
Exactly, because
Yes.
quite frankly, your story is your story. And if you ever go out for money from even at a bank, it's all in the numbers. It's nice to have a vision and have a dream, but unless the numbers are there, there's no value to the business. I did a podcast recently with a gentleman who specializes in valuation, and he said it's all in the numbers. And whatever you do, try to show profit. Don't. We were talking about companies that show no profit, so they pay no taxes and then have no value. Um,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
eh,
I think sometimes we need a brain shift around taxes, right? Because taxes are actually a good thing. Taxes are a sign that you're succeeding. Now, you don't want to pay more than your fair share,
no.
but you should be paying taxes because that means you've got profit and you're doing something important in the world.
And you don't want to
And
find yourself now going to something for money to take you
yep,
to the next level, and they're looking and you have no track record of delivering, a positive
profits,
profit.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, it's a time to really get steeped in what is essential to be a successful woman entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur. You can leave out the woman because it is as relevant for men as well. And, women are creating businesses far faster today than the men are. And now you want to figure out how do I grow, how do I sustain it, and how do I be that success that I know I can achieve. The other thing, and I add this because when I had done research on women entrepreneurs early in the business, is they often don't know whether they have a product of any value to anybody. They
Oh, wow.
they had an idea,
Hmm.
but the market wasn't interested in either the way they positioned it, how they were selling it, how they were marketing it. They missed the boat. But there are some women who I've met who have found how to switch that into a better market and whoosh, it all blew. And they had no idea that a little something could change it from little to big. And they are cool stories. I could share a couple.
I would love to hear one of those. But before I hear one of those, I guess I kind of want to delve into the decision behind bootstrapping versus getting investment because that's kind of a big one. And I think there are some myths or thought misconceptions around getting an investor or an investment and what that's going to do for you as opposed to bootstrapping your sales into something larger.
Well, when you start looking for an investor, the question is, what are they going to want in exchange for their resources? What are they going to bring? And, I had one situation where the investor was with them for 14 years. They stuck. They went through good times and bad times. They were aligned with what the mission of the company was and how they were going to grow it. And as it grew, they could see the opportunities coming together. Bootstrapping, angel funding, or more friends and family than angel funding, give you soft money that you can return an investment on without the hard expectations. But I do think that when you reach a point where your seriousness is now to be tested, you're going to the next stage, and you can see it coming in. You're going to need some money from someone who's going to be aligned with you and your growth, can see the market and as it's growing and see the role you play in it. And then you have a partner who's going to help you sustain your growth. And you really are looking for a financial partner who can help do that. And so, from my own experiences and those I've worked with, it's a different story. You're no longer just nice, it's really essential. And the money isn't just neat, but it's really an extraordinarily important part of your mindset about how I'm going to grow this. You treat it very seriously.
Yeah, I like that. So back to your stories.
I love working with women who are creating companies, and we're now involved with a bunch of them who are creating companies with purpose, women entrepreneurs who see beyond the profits, but use as a platform purpose. One that I love that switched from okay to really cool, Daniel Finkelstein and Time Sullivan started. They left corporate where they had very good jobs and they wanted to do something purposeful and meaningful. And one of the things they found was, and you'll enjoy this, period products. The whole world of getting sustainable period products for women was not being addressed. So they found some,
Yes.
and they began to develop it. And their stuff was going on shelves, competing with others just like them. And they said, how are we going to break through and grow with more geometrically than arithmetically? How are we going to really?
Right.
And their company, now called Unicorn, they realized that the biggest missing part was having period products available in the stalls in restrooms.
Okay. Yeah.
We have toilet paper there, it's free, but you don't have free period products of any kind. And so they created Unicorn, which is an extraordinarily beautiful holder that's now being installed in bathrooms really across the country. And they've gone from little to huge.
Nice.
Done it by and they've gone to the facilities, not to individuals. And they realized it's not selling onesies, it's providing access to it where the employer or the building owner understands. We were in a conference out in Nashville, they were there, and all the bathrooms there had these lovely celebration of being a woman, unicorn. And I
Nice.
say that because they saw, and this is Blue Ocean at its biggest, they saw an unmet need and nobody was solving it. It wasn't having sanitary products available, it was having it available when you needed them and for free. And
Yeah,
I
exactly.
watched,
And you don't have to, awkwardly sneak out of the bathroom and ask some woman that you don't know, hey, do you have anything in your purse?
well, and it is not easy for women anywhere in the world to be a woman.
Yeah.
And I use their story whenever I can because they're two very successful women. They're great fun, and they're getting all kinds of accolades for doing something that should have been a long time ago. Why is it so hard, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they have little machines that you put your money into, and you could get a tampon out of it, but they were broken and never refilled.
Oh,
What
exactly. They were always empty.
always empty. You had to pay for it. So that's one that I always love. And then there's Dr. Renetta Dallas, who is a wonderful woman who is a naturopathic doctor, an author, a trainer, a raw food chef, all kinds of things. But she tells her story about being in the military and coming down with tuberculosis and coming into this country, back to the country, and realizing that nobody had anything that was able to take care of her. And she changed
Mm.
her whole diet and began to develop things that were healthy. And she realized that the food that she was eating wasn't doing good things for her health and well being. She managed to overcome her illness and created something called popcorn.
Oh,
And it's everywhere. And she became a huge success. But it wasn't sufficient. But she found a healthy way to make popcorn and began to put it into stores who wanted a healthy, sustainable way to enjoy good food fast. And Dr. Dallas talks about how health, well-being isn't separate. These things are all connected. And also making money isn't separate from purpose. And now, but part of it came out of their own experiences as women. Part of it came out of her experience as being ill. And part of it has the creativity. When you say, how did you build your own business? I think women have a creative side to them, which can see things in ways that open up new markets. And they do it joyfully. It's hard. And they need the financing. They need someone who can believe. They have to develop the revenue. But they can begin to tell a story that's hopeful and has more than just a product with a market to it, has purpose that has value all by itself. And so I get excited working with them because they inspire you to lift higher. It isn't sufficient to be good at what you're doing. It's to have a purpose that multiplies well beyond that.
absolutely. I do want to delve a little bit into this tension, perhaps, that women sometimes feel around purpose and profit. Um, Many of us have been raised that you're not supposed to talk about money or that it's dirty or whatever the story was in your family of origin. And, there may be this tension where it feels like profit is kind of sullying your purpose. What do you have to say to someone who's wrestling with that?
You raise a very important thing. Your story creates the world that you live in. Where that story came from isn't always understood. And so now the question becomes, why? And I don't think that they're doing these things purposefully because they want to color the profit in some fashion to make it feel better. I
Mm,
think it's actually the opposite. They want to be very profitable, but they also want to do something that's meaningful and in some ways, so they matter. And,
yeah.
and so for the women who are uncomfortable with the financial side, we talked about earlier. So on the one hand, you have to become really cool about the numbers. And now you have to set it into a context that makes you feel like this is a purpose beyond just the numbers. That may be complicated on one hand, or it may be just simply reframing your story. And
Mm,
you are the only one who controls that story. You can hear others, but it's your own story that I mean, as an anthropologist, I work on this all the time because your story can either lift you up or hold you down. And the women who I mentioned, they all said I had to change the story in my head. For Danielle in time, it was a profitable, sustainable period product. And then it became a whole new market. And it was a way of taking something that was struggling to really break into the profitable and make it absolutely incredible new market, new buyer, new purpose, new location. So think about this and manage your mind because your story is the thing that's going to hold you back. You made a very good point. For women, it's not good to talk about money. Why? Who said?
yeah, that's a good question. And I think those are questions that I like to encourage people to ask.
Yes, because nobody controls your story. You control it yourself. And so if you say, okay, I can be profitable and purposeful, I can be profitable and matter. It's okay to make a profit on my product. It's okay to be good at it and run a good business. And I can be a tough, strong leader who also has a big heart. Women have that joyful part to be both. And I think that's what makes us so exceptional. We have an opportunity to be purpose-driven entrepreneurs who can make a difference in the world.
I love that. That is awesome sauce. So I know you have balanced purpose and profit in your business. Talk to us a little bit about how you navigated that balance yourself.
Carefully. I'm because the one thing I learned early was that if you clicked with a client, you hung around for a while.
Hmm.
And in some ways, you were bringing them a new way to see themselves and their business. As an anthropologist, one of the first things I would do with my clients was take them exploring. And so my purpose was to help them see things through a fresh lens. And the only way they could do that was to get out of their office and go think about their clients by seeing how they actually use their product or thought about their services and begin to change their mindset about what it was I was doing, they were doing. So my purpose was, yeah, I had to help their business or their university or their not-for-profit. But at the end of the day, it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about them as people seeing things in a much more holistic and important fashion. They matter differently. And so I became really an advocate for transformation. My clients didn't know it, but I mean, my college client, he had come in, he was a new president. They had been stuck and stalled. They weren't going to make it if we didn't change it. And I said to him, look, you could stay or we can change. And now nobody's going to like the change. The faculty I know are not going to like it. I said, so let's find a way of really coaching this in a transformational fashion so you grow and they grow. It was very multi-purposed and very intentional to go beyond simply we need more students into something that was really going to make a better place.
I like that. That that wider vision. Can you give me a couple examples of how people you've worked with or how you have gone to see the client interacting with your product or with your service? Because I think sometimes it's maybe not very intuitive to know where to go find them.
And that is just what we do. So I'd be delighted to share with you story after story about the observational and participation part of how we take a client to get out of the office and really see what's going on.
I like that. Let's do that when we come back from the break because we're right up on the break. So hang with us if you're interested in learning more about how we do that observational process. And hang with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for hanging in with us through the break. This is Zofia Morales. I'm here with Dr. Andi Simon. And before the break, we had kind of delved our tippy toes into the question of, well, how do you observe your customer in the wild? Especially when sometimes it's not so clear where you need to be observing your customer in the wild. So take it away, Dr. Andi. How do we go there?
It's a great question. The most interesting thing that I bring we talked about purpose and profit. What I bring to clients is a understanding that what we think we know about our clients is really what we think we know. It isn't necessarily what is actually going on, how they're really using your product, what really matters to them, because they will tell you what they think you want to hear. And then you go and you spend some time actually watching them. And I take my clients with me because if I go by myself, they delete me when I come back. No, that really wasn't what it was. You take them with you and you listen together. And then you leave the situation wherever you are and you write down everything you thought you heard. You realize that you were together in one place with two different experiences going on.
Mm.
And that's where you have some deep conversations. So I'll give you a couple of illustrations.
Yes, please.
Because they're all fun. I had one, and he's a chapter in my book, and Mark Schmidt had a battery company. And he waited for people to bring them the specs, and then he built great batteries. He took us to China to see his new factory.
Wow.
The business was dependent upon people bringing him. He didn't make anything until they came with specifications. And so I said, let's find out what they really are concerned about. And so we went out. I went out with a sales manager, with his salespeople, with Mark. We went out to watch what they were doing, look at what they were doing with the batteries, understand some of their challenges. One place we went to the factory floor and we watched, and their biggest challenge was having the right battery at the right time available. And he began to create almost a vending machine to solve the problem. Went to another one, and they were really interested because they said, well, we really don't need you until we need you. And that became sort of one of those ahas that said, so how do I stay in business if they don't need me until they need me? Then he lost one of his largest clients because they wanted rechargeable batteries. And he said, oh, we don't do that. Now, those are famous words.
Oh, yeah.
Open the door. And so I said to him, why don't you do, well, that's not our expertise. I said, okay, there are lots of ways you can solve that problem. You can partner with somebody, you can rethink. Well, that's not what we do. I said, okay. And finally, somebody said to him and to me when we were out there doing some exploration, Mark, you're missing the point. I don't need a battery. I need lighter, longer, stronger power solutions.
Talk about stepping you out of your little box. Yes.
And out of your comfort zone. And then he had the epiphany. He said, oh, Andi, that's what you've been saying. I said, no, that's what they've been saying. but you can't hear it because that's not what you do. And so that's one of my favorite stories. Then there was another story, Benjamin Updike, and they made a wonderful house wrap. And they were stalled after the 2008 recession. And they were trying to figure out what we could use this for and how to use it. It was good in areas where there was a lot of moisture.
Sure.
And so we went out to one of his distributors, a store, and we talked to them. What is it you're finding? What are the trends? I love to ask people what are keeping them up at night? What are the trends? And have a conversation. Now we're listening. People say, "Are you observing?" Yeah, we're listening to their story. And we're not poking around with questions. We just want to hear what's keeping him up and what's happening. And I said, "Well, how are you using this product?" He said, "Well, the one thing that's growing is stucco remediation."
Hmm.
Okay, tell us some more. I mean, it's not new house construction. Well, you
Yeah.
see, all the mold that happens between the stucco and the wood is a real problem. And so there's a whole industry that's emerged where they're taking off the stucco and they're putting new wrap in, and your wrap is perfect for it. And we walked out, and I said to the head of sales, I said, "Did you know that stucco remediation was happening, much less was perfect for what you're doing?" He said, "I had no idea." And I said, "Huh." He said, "I have a stucco home. I'm going to go get an evaluation of whether I've got mold." I said,
Yeah.
"So interesting." I said, "And let's take a look at where people are finding you and what they're asking for. That's not your core market." And what we found was that people from the South and Southwest were emailing him. I said, "My goodness, they want your product, but we don't have any distributors down there." I said, "Well, can't you just drop ship it? They'll pay you credit card." And he
Yeah.
said, "Well, we don't do that." I love those words.
There's opportunity back there.
And so I said, "Okay, so let me take a look at what people are asking you where they're from." There were 60 emails, plus or minus. And I said to him, "They're all from the place where you don't do it." He said, "Well, what are they trying to do?" Stucco remediation was
Of course.
so we created an Amazon store for him. What was interesting was that his marketing person was at a meeting I was doing a speaking tour at. She said, "We're still pushing them out to people who aren't in our core market who need it and are coming to us, and we're selling it, and they love the way we make it fast and easy. And it has nothing to do with a distributor. It has to do with customer direct, and it's a whole new market." Now, these are interesting for us because if we hadn't gone exploring, we'd be frustrated that new construction was slow and we can't use our product, but somebody's using it and needs
Yeah.
it. I love one of my favorite places was in hospitals. I had a hospital for 4 years that I was working with, and I hung out in the lobby. You can find out all kinds of stories. People were lost when they were coming in. They were desperate to find a way around. Hospitals are big and scary. They weren't coming
Yeah.
in because it's discouraged. And so we created a whole, way of giving them a guide. And the doctors had the name of the guide. So before they came, they had a guide, all kinds of things to help overcome the fear of coming to the hospital. Now, these are little things, but they're big things.
Yeah.
And they're opportunities to take a good business and make it greater, and to find companies that are stuck to find opportunities to grow larger. And I can only tell you that the opportunities for every one of your listeners is right here. If only they can open their mind to think about what we don't do and why not. I can keep telling you stories, but my favorite is sitting on the telephone for a customer service company and listening to the phone calls coming in from everyone who is over 50. I said, "Well, young people, don't use a telephone. Now you're missing the whole market." And it's not hard. It just requires an open mind and a willingness to listen to your customers tell you things that you don't want to hear, and stop trying to fit them into your box. Find a new box. I often say it's not about thinking out of the box, it's creating a new sandbox. It's a blue ocean
Mm.
waiting for you. But it's fun. And I enjoy myself.
I love that. It sounds like you have an absolute blast doing this. Um, a lot of entrepreneurship can be an extremely lonely journey. Your employees don't get it. Oftentimes, your family doesn't get it. Your neighbors don't get it. Why are you doing this? And it's sort of hard to find other entrepreneurs. How how do you get some connection, some mentorship, and build professional networks that can support your success And what advice do you have for other women looking to do that?
Well, those are two very big questions to unpack. The first one is how do you find people who can be your peers, your mentors, your colleagues, and not just your customers? Because your clients aren't your friends, although sometimes they turn into friends. But they expect you to be the wisdom, and now you need others to bounce ideas off of. There's an
Right.
organization that I belong to called the Women Business Collaborative. And it's an organization of women in business to help other women in business. And it is a wonderful place for you to meet women. I also am an advisor on Enterprising Women, which is an organization of women who are helping women and help them grow. And I do think there's the women presidents, WPO. There's WeBank. There are associations of women who are coming together to help others, rise together. But I also find that there's always one or two or three folks who, through your networking, become your colleagues.
Yeah.
Begin to talk to them differently than the folks who are a little bit more stranger to you, but you need to do also. And I also think the pandemic taught us that you can get on a Zoom with somebody for an hour and get inspired, get good ideas, and help each other find solutions. And then there are some people who I drop a note to every month and say, how are you doing?
Yes.
It's okay. Everything women it's challenging and you need a friend and it's okay. Besides, my favorite friend is my husband, who I've been married to for 57 years, and he's a serial entrepreneur. And so the two of us have spent many nights wandering around talking about ideas, solving problems, and trying to figure out, why did I buy that business? That was not a good idea.
Why did I do this?
But he's done well, and I've done well because in some ways we help each other overcome those big questions and stay true to who we are. We are entrepreneurs. We love to build things, and I really do think that with a little purpose, it's more than just profit. It really is something special.
I love that. I love that a lot. So, did you bring a gift with you today? I thought you did.
Did I bring a gift, or can I offer a gift?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I'd be delighted to offer. And I don't have lots of my books, but for today's talk, this book probably is the most relevant. It's called On the Brink, A Fresh
Hmm.
Lens to Take Your Business to New Heights. It's about how a little anthropology can help your business grow. All my books are on Amazon, but I'd be delighted to send a couple of those books out if you have a way of sampling folks who come in. Maybe the first five will come to you with a desire to. I'd be delighted to send them. I'll sign them and ship them on out. It's a
All
great book,
right.
and I think
That
they'd enjoy
sounds
it.
good. Yes, if you're interested in taking her up on that, you can send an email to Zofia at steminstilettos.com and just put Dr. Andi Simon in the subject line, and we'll count up the first five and get those out.
Don't forget your address. It's hard to send it otherwise.
Oh, Zofia at steminstilettos.com.
Oh,
That's
yours, I
Zofia.
got. I
Yeah.
got it. I want their address when they
Oh,
send note and say, I want one of your
well, well, yeah, we would respond back and say, okay, you're one of the five. We need to know where to mail it.
You have no idea how many times I get mails, and I don't know where it's sending to. So, but that would be
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, to kind of put a bow on things here today, um, if you could wave a magic wand and create the ideal environment for women entrepreneurs, what would it look like? And then what steps can we take towards making that a reality?
that's a big one to unpack as well. To wrap us up, if you are thinking about being in your own business, and I don't care where you are in your career, think about three things. Who needs you? Start from the outside backwards, right? What is it currently that's solving their problem? Because if you're going to compete, it's going to be a really nasty one. So you want to be creating something.
Yeah.
And now the third part is, okay, how are you going to create something that's going to open up a market innovatively by adding value that others aren't? An entrepreneur isn't a small business person. You can open a small business. You can look like another. You can make cupcakes. I've had people call me, I'm opening business for cupcakes. I got it. But if you
Okay.
want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be opening a new market space. So start from the outside in. Who needs me? What's their unmet need? What's their problem? Why don't they have a good solution? A little like unicorn, seeing that a sanitary napkin was really nice, but getting access to it was even nicer. And so the question is, what problem are you going to solve for whom? How am I going to do it? And then, how do I build it so that I can create value innovatively for people who have a real issue? This is a time for you to think beyond simply, I want to be in business. It's not about you, it's about them. And if you can bring value out to the market, it'll be waiting for you to solve the problems in ways that will make you very happy, excited, purposeful, and profitable. And don't confuse the two. It's okay to have both. It's a time for us to have purpose and profit, and they come together. Enjoy the journey.
I love that. That is an amazing way to put a bow on it right there. It gives me chills.
It sounds like that's what you've done.
So, thank you so much for joining us here today, Dr. Andi. This is fabulous.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you to all you out there in listener land who've come and joined us today. I appreciate you investing your time here in this conversation and in yourself, in your business, in your efforts, in your community. You are making a difference in the world. And I want to hear from you. Drop me an email at Zofia at Trent. I can't talk today. Zofia at stemandstilettos.com. And just let me know, is there a topic you want to see me take on, someone you'd like to see me talk to, or just let me know how the show has touched your life. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, go out, be bold, and be beautiful.